Alright. This is the GBS tutorial. The first one that I've done. So, starting with an introduction on what GBS is. This is Gelato 1. That is the episode that we've entered. But within Gelato 1, it is possible to access the shine for Gelato 8, which is over here in this hut. And so we have some methods for clipping into the hut. We can actually just do it with the coconut, which is always available in the stage, right there. And getting the Gelato 8 shine in Gelato 1 means that we can basically access the menu for the rest of all of the episodes in Gelato, which is most notably useful because you can menu into the Gelato 7 shine the next time you enter the level. And so just get that shine, and you know, the end condition for the game unlocking Corona is that you need all of the episode 7 shines from the 7 worlds, and so it's useful for that reason if you're trying to complete any kind of full game run. So GBS is used in pretty much every full game category for that reason, Gelato Beach Skip. Because, you know, instead of having to do episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you switch them for episodes 8, as done in 1, and 7. Or I should say shines. So episode 1 get the shine for Gelato 8, and then episode 7 to get the shine for 7. And so this shine, GBS, is also shorter than any of the others in Gelato, and so you end up saving what should be 5 levels, but is actually a little bit more time. It's often up to 10 minutes in any percent, and I didn't know Cataquax can come out this far. Actually, I guess I did. So that's pretty much that. Saves 5 shines in a bit, and 10 plus minutes in any percent. So this is the glitch description, right? So the standard method for it is to get the coconut out of the tree. Because you can clip with the coconut, it's easier and faster to do that. The coconut is in this tree, you can't see it from here. It's the easiest and fastest methods to do GBS. There are some situational methods with the Oshi, and there's also one that doesn't use the hover nozzle, which can be used in hoverless. But I'll just be teaching the mainstream setup because it is the simplest one. So the nuts basically pushes Mario through. If you have the right angle and set it all up, the nut pushes Mario through the roof. And then you can hover, and with good control, good timing, you basically hover all the way through the roof and get into the shine. So the coconut basically pushes Mario down into the roof, he clips into the roof, and then the roof is like a little region that you need to navigate, and then once you get to the top of it, you can fall into the shine. And that's basically that. So when it comes to planning for GBS, pretty much you need to know a tree strat, you need to know a strat for getting the coconut off the tree. Then because you need the angle to be exact in order to do the clip, you have to have a strat for getting on the roof with the correct angle. And then you also need a strat for doing the clip itself. So those are the 3 strats that we will build up and focus on: the tree strat, the roof strat, and the clip strat. So I'll start then by showing off the basic strats for approaching the clip. So the basic tree strat and the basic roof strats that you can do at any level. Yeah, like this tutorial is intended for absolutely everyone. You don't need any previous skill in the game, you don't need any kind of movement, it's just kind of a very precise set of inputs that you just have to do. All of the movement here is very basic. You don't have to actually be fast about anything, you can just you just need to get the coconut over there and then follow the instructions basically. Get the coconut over there, but don't drop it in the sea because then it despawns. That's like one of the most important things that we're going to have to work around with our approach. But yeah. So yeah, the approach strat is going to be from the beginning, from the top, jump dive, A plus B at the same time, and then roll out with a long A press I'm going to do. So just hold A for a bit. And then spin jump dive. So while we're rolling out, we can input a spin and then get a spin jump dive the next time we press A, B. Those are the inputs. And then we'll get a water slide because we'll be spin jumping out of the sea, and so we'll get this water slide, and that's basically the beginning. We're trying to get to the coconut tree by sliding to it. When you're in midair here, in the spin jump dive, make sure you zoom the camera in. There will be a few different places where we zoom the camera in, and the reason for it is in order to... we want the camera to be zoomed in by the time we get to the end, and so we just take a couple of opportunities to try to get it zoomed in, but it might zoom out with further camera movement. Sometimes you'll nick it backwards if you pull the C-stick a little bit backwards by accident. So it always pays to keep trying to zoom the camera in whenever you're using the camera this level. Yep. So after we've done the slides, switch to the hover nozzle and zoom in. Then we're approaching the tree. Here we roll out approximately as we cross over onto the grass, do another spin jump dive onto the tree. You get higher up the tree if you hit the spin jump dive on like the first possible frame, right? But it doesn't matter too much. The point is just we're gonna get onto the tree, and then in order to get the coconut out, when you're on the tree, keep holding up, right? So you'll keep climbing the tree, and while you're holding up, you can start holding B, and that is a consistent way to pick up the coconut. So you press B to pick up the coconut, but you're basically buffering the B press, right? But you can't press B if you are not holding up, or otherwise you will get off the tree. That's the input for dismounting the tree. So the full set of inputs, we're also going to turn the camera while holding up and then start holding B. And we just want to turn the camera so we're loosely facing the cabana, right? That's all that we're trying to do here. You can turn the camera while still holding up if you want. That's a good way of keeping the angle, but we're gonna fix the angle later anyway, so I tend to not do that. But it doesn't really make a difference. Yep. So once we've gotten to the top here, hold B, and then as you're picking up the coconut, it is nice to buffer a spin put. You know, for a beginner, you don't have to worry about the timing of this. It doesn't actually have to be buffered. Just when you're on the tree, spin forwards and jump off. This spin helps with not getting wedged in the sand. That's why I tend to recommend it. You can just mash A here to get a triple jump. Anytime you're landing from a spin, you can press A to get the triple jump. And that's basically how we're going to approach the cabana with that kind of movements, right? And while you're landing from a spin, because a spin has low gravity, you can hold up to center the camera. You have a good amount of time to do that. That's not to center it, to zoom it in, sorry. And yeah, that's basically it. We just are trying to, I'll do it one more time. We're trying to get to the cabana. Here, do another spin here, because then you can drift over this, or lean in a bit to the right as well, actually. Have like a trajectory in this direction, because then you can basically cross this gap and have a good amount of time to set yourself up, compose yourself, as you walk towards this section, which is where we're going to start the roof strats. The other thing I want to say is if this happens, you land in the sea, just kind of jump back to this kind of area where you can stand on the ground, and when you can stand, you can just do a side flip up, or you can do a spin up, which is what I tried to do there. So it's just not a problem. Like if you're swimming, just swim over here or jump over here, and then when you're here, jump so that you'll end up standing, right? And that is how you get to the roof section. And so I'm gonna teach the basic roof strat then. So that was the basic tree strat. Basic roof strat is we're kind of approaching from here. When we at a certain point in this direction, we basically line up facing the shine approximately, and once we cross a line, we press B and throw the coconut. Just running, don't jump, throw the coconut. Don't do this, or otherwise, yeah. So just like from running, throw the coconut, and it should sort of land in this dark yellow section towards the back, or like just past it, as it has here. Let me show you just really quickly a cue that I use for when to throw the coconut. This is just for speed. It doesn't really make a difference. It's just it makes the setup nice and crisp to execute. It's this one, isn't it? I'm just looking through all my photos. Yeah, so pretty much like when the front of Mario's shadow crosses this blue line, which is like parallel to the Can you see my hand? Yeah, there it is. It's parallel to the floorboard line, or like an extension of it. Like when the front of Mario's big circular shadow stuff is two shadows, right? One for Mario, one for the coconut, and they're kind of wedged onto each other. When the front of that crosses the line, that's about the perfect time to throw the fruit for this strat. So we'll keep going. You know, I don't really see a reason you would be scared to do this, but you can also, of course, just stop, press B to put the coconut down. And like I said, the ideal position for it is about there. Yes, that's pretty good. Important for GBS, you have to center the camera from the right. So like, we're gonna grab one of a few different places. This could be this railing, or this post, either of those. Like, they just center your angle so that it's pointing in the correct direction. You see in the data display the angle of 0. That's what we want. So then we press L. A few different places you can center the camera. It's also possible to do it here. When you get this instant ledge grab get up, the little animation there also centers the camera. And you want to make sure that you center it from the right, which means, imagine, you know, you're Mario, like, looking straight on. Draw a line straight through Mario, and then on the right half of that line is where the camera should physically be. So if you imagine the physical camera object, which is looking at Mario now, it is on the right, behind Mario, like behind and right, and it's looking into the left half plane. And that is how you want to center it. Because if you center it from this angle, looking from the left, then Mario will be centered, but the camera will not, like the angle of the camera relative to Mario is going to be slightly off, and that causes problems. I'll show you what problems it causes actually. So here, like, center from this side, what then happens is, I mean, I can jump about fine. It doesn't change anything, but like, say I try to do GBS. If you look at what happens to the angle, it changes to 65516, which 65536 and 0 are the same thing. It wraps around, and so this is an angle of -20, so it just kind of changes because the camera is in slightly the wrong position. It fixes Mario's angle to the wrong thing. So that's why we have to center from the right. And once you have centered the camera, so like here, then you can preserve the camera angle just by jumping and doing all of your movement in midair. That's the safest way of preserving your angle. It's also possible to preserve your angle by walking forwards, like this. It's also not going to change the angle, but you want to make sure you don't walk against the coconut, because that will change it, as you can see. But also, it is true that, like, because we're not changing the camera, if the angle only slightly changes, then walking forward will straighten it out. This is important actually, if you're trying to do this fast. If you're trying to do it slowly, it's fine, just kind of jump about, wait for Mario to stop his animation, makes like you see his landing animation, wait for him to stop that, then walk forwards, grab the coconut and just kind of do the inputs slowly. I'll show you how to do the backflip in a sec, but yeah, just kind of like that. If you're trying to do it a bit more quickly, you'll run forward as soon as you land, which you can see changes the angle. And so when that happens, you want to make sure you run forward enough in order to fix it. So you can see here, like if I'm doing it fast, like running as soon as I land forwards, the angle can be off a little bit, but if I keep running forwards in order to get to the spots, it gets straightened out, and so it's just important to remember that. But yeah, there we go. Hops are pretty great for small adjustments. I'll actually show you how to do that on the roof, where we're trying to get into a very precise spot when we get onto the roof. But hops are nice for just very slightly changing your coordinates. If you see the Z coordinate, the X coordinate. Hops are, in my opinion, the easiest way to micro adjust your position. So, yeah. I just want to make sure I was clear about this. The things that can change your angle, if you don't like, if you run straight out of landing, a landing animation, and also if you ever bonk the fruit or anything else, it can change your angle a little bit. Walking into the fruit changes it as well, so grabbing the fruit nice and early will be safer, or just like, you know, if you want to absolutely make sure, you can just slowly approach the fruit. And those are the two things that mostly are responsible for losing angles in GBS. As well as obviously if you do a spin jump and you mess it up, you can get a wobble as well. But all of these things, like, trust me, if you walk forward enough, they just get corrected, so it's not a huge problem. Because the camera is in the right place is the important thing. And also because we haven't changed our angle by that much. Like, we haven't changed it by this much, because that will start moving the camera. Right, so what we do then, right, once we've picked up the coconut by pressing B, we sort of stand in the middle of this dark yellow section, and then press R and A, and as soon as you've pressed A, you can hold up, and that's the safest way to get onto the roof. If you're doing it fast, you can actually keep holding up and just input digital R followed by A. Important to remember with the backflip, it doesn't work during a landing animation. This happens, right? But if you hold R for long enough after the animation, Mario eventually does a little squat, you can see it, and then you can backflip. But you can avoid this problem because you can always backflip if you're in the middle of running. Just smash R down, you can immediately backflip. So if you're doing it fast, you would do it like this. Just keep holding up, press B, and you should be fine. When we are here, you can, for safety again, zoom the camera in. Sometimes movements will, here the camera's a bit zoomed out. I don't even know how I managed to get it zoomed out, because on the save state it was fine, but yeah. For safety, it's always good once you're at the top to zoom the camera in again. Unless, you know, if you're experienced, you can make sure you've zoomed it in on this section, and then just make sure you don't pull the C-stick back beyond the halfway point at any point after that. And the way to zoom the camera in, you don't just hold up, of course, because you don't know if you might change the angle. So we're going to recenter the camera with L, but we also need to make sure we center it from the right. So basically the simplest way to achieve this is to zoom in using upright C-stick like this, and then press L, so like this. And that's the way to make sure you have the camera zoomed in and centered. And that sets us up for GBS. That's the kind of position we're looking to be in, and then we're going to find the position to stand in and then do the inputs for the clip, and that's the clip setup, which I'll do next. Last thing I wanted to show before I move on to the clip setup is remounting. So if you mess up GBS, like however you mess it up. You might go under the hut, over the hut, you still have your angle. So in order to get back on the roof, it is simplest to jump, and while you're in midair, hold back, and you can keep pressing A, you'll preserve some of your speed. And then remount in the same way as before, with, you know, run up and backflip. Or of course you can remount by one of the other methods. If you're confident in buffering spins, that works, and it's also possible if you're like really far back to triple jump onto the roof. But yeah, that's remounting. Don't lose your angle, because you don't need to, just top backwards and then you don't have to set your angle up again. But if you do lose your angle, then do not hesitate to set it up again. And that's basic tree and roof strats done. We're going to move on to GBS itself, clip setup. Alright, so... yeah, I'll just call it clip. Alright, so with the clip, right? I'll show you the inputs for the clip first. They're pretty simple. When we're standing in the right spot, and I'll show you the spot later on, you press B in order to drop the coconut first. That's the first thing you do. And then you have this animation where Mario is dropping the coconut. You can't do much during the animation. And during that animation we start holding up. And that's the first half of the setup, is this. And that should, in almost every situation, give you a clip into the roof when the coconut eventually pushes you in. When that happens, we will have a visual cue. The visual cue for where to stand, by the way, approximately is on this dark line that Mario is standing on at the moment. That's very approximate, but it is basically, loosely speaking, you stand there, you press B, you hold up, and then when you, because we have the camera zoomed in, that's necessary for this visual cue. When the roof of the cabana hits approximately the, you see Pinner Park in the distance with like the Ferris wheel. You see the line between the cliff and the green grass on top. It's approximately when it hits that line. So like approximately here. This is too late actually. Well, it's not too late, but it's not the visual cue. It's like towards the end of where it works. But yeah, like kind of approximately here, like in the middle of the green line, like that. And at this point, the input that you do is you drop the stick to neutral and smash R down at the point where that visual cue happens, like this. Wait. Like that. And you can finish GBS by then just doing nothing and hovering in, and you can drop R a little bit early once you get over the shine. It's not too risky to do that. But in general, you don't have to drop R, you just do nothing, you have GBS done. Or you can, the other way of doing it is to input a backwards tap. So the backward tap is like when you go over the line here, the line where you were standing in the first place, you just tap back like this. You know, it's kind of a clean backward tap all the way to the end. You don't hesitate too long on the tap, you don't linger, you just tap. Yeah, and that's it. So it seems like it should be pretty simple from what I've said. You have those two cues, like one for the position, one for the timing, and the inputs are just B, up, neutral. Sorry, I need to actually look at the cue. B, up, neutral, and possibly tap back if you want to. But yeah, if only things were actually that simple. The problem with GBS, right, what makes it inconsistent is it is deterministic depending on the Z coordinate where you're standing, so that's forwards and backwards. That's the most important thing. GBS actually works the same way depending on where you're standing in the X coordinate. It's just absolutely not a problem. but the Z coordinate is kind of the crucial thing that affects it. And so it is deterministic. If you stand in the exact same spot on the Z coordinate, then GBS will always work the same way. But if you move even 3 units, 2 units, sometimes there are major changes in how GPS works. So I would call it a chaotic function of the Z position. Basically, chaotic meaning it is sensitive to small changes in the input. You will get large and unpredictable changes in the output. And when I say the output, I mean the cues for when to hover, the timing windows, how many frames you have to hover, the inputs that work, and the animation as well all change slightly, but enough that it can put you off and mess up the setup. So basically, in order to deal with that, you have a trade-off, right? The more time you spend getting into the same Z position every time, the more consistent your GBS will be. But you will lose time to setting it up because you're spending more time trying to get into the exact same position each time. And it's obviously impossible to get into a you know, the Z coordinate has a resolution of like 0.0001 or so, something of that order of magnitude, and so it's obviously not feasible to actually get in this exact same position every run, particularly because you can't actually see the Z coordinate. You're having to react to the cues on the roof, right? And so that's where the trade-off comes in. So what I would say is that the way GBS is usually done, right, is that you aim for a specific spot. You try to get the same spot every time. But in a run, you will not always hit it exactly because it's quite hard to drift into the exact same position each time. And so you kind of react, you kind of know where you're standing, and you can basically react on it a little bit and change your inputs if you need to. Or you can go for a strategy where you go for this input that is most likely to work, or you can add in a bit of reaction to how you're hovering and these kinds of things, right? But basically along those lines. But for an absolute beginner, I'm gonna encourage you to spend more time setting up the position so that it works consistently exactly the same way each time. And for that, I'm gonna give a very precise set of visual cues. So again, I use these visual cues in runs, even though they're extremely precise. I just don't beat myself up if I don't exactly hit them every time, right? So it's like basically a good practice cue, but you can take liberties when you get a bit faster to kind of just fudge it a bit, stand in slightly the wrong position, and it'll still work. So yeah, we're going to be very disciplined with positioning, and then we're going to graduate to a slightly more intuitive GBS, if that makes sense. So speaking of intuition for GBS, right? That's an important thing that I have to teach. So intuition for GBS. Basically, if you look at H and V, those are kind of the important things. Those are the speed indicators. One is horizontal speed and V is vertical speed. When we do GBS, we're going to be hovering. Pretty much just hovering through the roof. If you remember like one of the inputs, the one where you just hover, like with neutral stick, this is called stickless GBS because you just don't touch the stick. You'll see that just hovering works, and so it's important to understand what hovering does. Hovering always gives you consistently the same acceleration vertically. So you look at the pattern of how the V speed works during a hover. You know, it starts at 3, reduces to 2, then you slightly start falling down, and then once the hover stops, you drop, right? So you can see that in the V speed. The horizontal speed of a hover basically increases to a fixed point of around 3, or indeed decreases to that point, provided you're holding neutral. So like I'm running forward here, I hover, I slow down to about 3 as well. So we have here a diagonal roof, which is kind of like this kind of a space, and we need to make sure we stay in it from the point we clip into the roof, which is around here. We need to stay in the roof until we get above the shine, which means staying in this little sort of diagonally slanted layer, or how I would describe that. I don't know. And so basically, if you mess up GBS, you can either pop out of the top of the roof or you can pop out of the bottom of the roof, right? Bottom is like go very late, or wait, sorry. Go very late, like, you know, whatever. Like this, you'll end up on the bottom, which often involves grabbing the underside. Or if you go too early, you would, what even is too early here? It's like here. I can't actually, I keep getting it. Like here. Ah, fuck you. This is early. It's not early. I don't know why I'm so, I guess I'm just really sleepy today. So my inputs are delayed relative to what I think they should be. That does happen sometimes. But yeah, you just pop out of the top. So the important thing to realize is what affects your trajectory here. Like your vertical acceleration and speed pattern is always the same, but the horizontal one is different. Horizontal speed starts by basically running into the coconut. You can see the pattern in how running in general gives you a horizontal speed that is around 30, and it goes up slightly and down slightly between like 26 and 33 or something like that. Can't remember the exact numbers. And that means that Mario has that speed, even though he's running into the coconut and getting pushed by it, he does have that horizontal speed. So as soon as you clip in, he preserves that speed and slows down. The later you clip into the roof, you have about 3 or 4 frames where it is viable to make GBS work. The later you clip in, the more horizontal speed you preserve, generally speaking. And not only that, but you're lower down. And so you get a trajectory. If you enter with more horizontal speed, you get a flatter trajectory, right? And if you enter with less, you get a more vertical trajectory. So you're more likely to pop under with more speed and over with less speed. And we can mitigate that by influencing our speed by holding up and down to accelerate and decelerate horizontally. So, for example, if your line is too low and you're going to pop under, you can hold back a little or tap back to cut your speed and then increase your trajectory so it's steeper and you will stay in the roof and approach the shine. And the opposite does work as well, where you can hold forward if you're going too slowly. Or if your trajectory is going to pop out of the top, it's too steep, you can flatten it by holding forwards to accelerate. Which is something I'm not going to recommend doing, based on, in general, how reactions and things work. I would say only tapping back sometimes is useful, otherwise I would not recommend tapping forward ever. But basically that's the intuition for GBS, which I thought was important to get out of the way so you can kind of understand, among other things, how to improvise GBS, how to react and things like this. Alright, so we're gonna find a very specific spot for GBS to work, and we're going to aim for a very specific spot. So I'm going to show you theoretically what the spot is that we're aiming for. So pay attention to the Z coordinate, because everything is relative to that. The X coordinate doesn't really make a difference. You can jump left and right on the Z coordinates. I don't know why... Sorry, on the X coordinate. I don't know why the Z coordinate changes when you jump left and right. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong there. Like, I'm preserving my angle, but the Z coordinate still changes. But it doesn't matter. The point is you can set up an X coordinate wherever you want, really. As long as it is such that you will hover into the shine. So you kind of approximately know the shine is dead center here with the blender, right? So anything like the spot that I usually go for is around here, and I'll show a visual cue for that, for the X position, left and right. But the only reason I have that visual cue is in order to make the visuals for the Z position consistent, so you can see the pattern of the shadow against the roof, to make that consistent, because that's what we're going to be reading in order to set the Z position. So Z position is... where is it? Here. Z. Alright, so this is like a theoretical overview of the positions that we're going to be aiming for. I would say, first of all, GBS works fine with any Z position that is above around 13125, which is around here. I'm not gonna say, like, for simplicity, wait, hang on. Let me just, yeah. For simplicity, I'm not gonna say 131. I'm just gonna call this, for example, a Z position of 24. And you can see this is quite far back in the sense that Mario's shadow is completely crossed the dark line. And that is like that. There's a dark line where the bottom of Mario's shadow is. Like if I'm standing here, I'm about touching the top edge of this dark line, right? Like this is about touching the top edge of the dark line. So like if you go further back than the entire dark line, then your position is kind of so far back that GBS becomes very janky and unpredictable. So I would say stand in front of that. But like if you stand between this position and the maximum position where GBS will work, which is around here, it's actually 1 unit behind here. But with this position, GBS doesn't work because that happens. Anywhere in that region, GBS works fine. But nonetheless, it is chaotic. Like I said, there are small changes in how it works depending on the regions. And so the zones of GBS, the Z coordinates. And so I'm gonna show off a few spots like this. And we're gonna aim for the green one. And we're gonna also learn to avoid the red one because the red spot is a half unit gap where GBS does not work. You just don't clip into the roof. I don't know why that is, but it is like that. And so like I said, these are spots to aim for. We don't, we're not going to get them every time. We don't have to be perfect, but particularly if you're a beginner, it is good to try to get into the exact same spot each time because you will then get a consistent GBS experience. Everything about GBS will be the same for you, which is ideal. Obviously in runs you can't see the Z position, which is why I'm going to teach visual cues for both avoiding the red zone and also for hitting the green zone. But I just wanted to sort of break down the zones briefly to just explain them with this diagram so that we know theoretically what we're looking for. The green zone is a 3-unit long zone that I picked out in testing as being kind of the nicest because you have it gives you 3 frames on which GBS can work, which I've labeled first, second and third frame. So you have the stickler setup that I showed you, and you also have the downward tap. And loosely speaking, in this zone, the stickler setup works on the first 2 frames, and the downward tap works on the second 2 frames. So the middle frame either works. With downward tap, you have to take this with a pinch of salt because, like, how you do the downward tap affects whether it works or not. But the downward tap, by just sort of tapping it the way I showed you earlier, is kind of easy and consistent enough that you don't have to worry too much. It should just always work, particularly in this zone. And the zones either side of this zone are completely fine. GBS will work almost always. It's just the first frame on stickless does not work in this zone. The downward tap always does. The downward tap is inherently more consistent than stickless. And the zone that is downwards of the good zone has what I call a bad animation. And what I mean by that is you see the 3 graphics that I've shown. Like in the ideal zone, this is what the coconut looks like. You're not looking at the coconut when you're doing the clip unless you learn to react to that when you're doing GBS, which is a different visual cue, I guess. But basically, these are the 3 frames it works on. This is what they look like. So it's like the frames where Mario starts getting pushed into the roof by the coconut. So like the one where it's on his head and then it kind of clips into him and he clips into the roof and then the coconut... Well, actually no, it's Mario who's clipping. The coconut's still on the roof, isn't it? And then you have the first frame where you cannot even see his legs. So that's the last frame that GBS works on. So the bad animation is basically what happens is Mario gets pushed into the roof 2 frames earlier, but the actual GBS timing remains the same as it was before. It loosely still corresponds with the visual cue of the Pinner Park in the background. But like the entire clip feels different because of this animation difference, and notably, I'll show it in a sec actually, but basically it is different enough that there's a very substantial way in which it affects timing the clip and how you react to the visual cue, and that's why I just wanted to make a note of the bad animation section. But if you still follow the instructions and time things with your intuition a little bit, you should still be able to make it work. And that's why I say it is good to aim for the green zone, even if you are slightly above or below it. You won't actually really have a problem with GBS. If you just time the inputs correctly, it's still likely to work, and that's kind of the way this is designed. So now I'm going to show the visual cues, right? First I'm going to show how to avoid the no clip section, and then I'm going to show how to try to hit the exact ideal green section. So let me bring up the picture actually that has the visual cues in it for GBS. So there are 3 little drawings I've done on the roof, and then there are 2 lines at the back which are for the timing cues. So first I'll just briefly mention the 2 lines that I've drawn. So when you're trying to time GBS, the top of the roof is coming up and covering Pinner Park. And I showed that there are 3 frames for the ideal section where it works. Well, frame 1 is approximately where the yellow line is, and then frame 2 is still moving up. Is a bit higher up. And those give you 2 distinct cues that you can use in order to try to hit either frame 1 or frame 2. Frame 3 is just really slightly higher than frame 2, but I wouldn't ever aim for frame 3 because you're much more likely to be too late when you do that. And so aiming for either of the first 2 frames I think is the play. The first frame is the line between like the cliff and the green, pretty much. It's slightly below that. And the second frame is just slightly above the midpoint of the green section. That's kind of loosely what you're aiming for. And then for the positioning cue, so the first cue is, you see the green circle, I've basically drawn, you're trying to get the spike in Mario's shadow, like the shadow between the coconut and whatever the blob on the right is. I'm still not sure what that is. But basically that, you're trying to get that on top of the little spike thing. And this is only an approximate cue. The only reason we have this cue is in order to stand in the correct X position in order to make the other cues work. So standing left and right. And once you're standing in the right place there, these are the exact cues that I use. So the red circle is the most important one. It's pointing to a corner in the polygon of the shadow of the coconut, right? There is a corner there, you'll be able to see it if you're just staring at your screen. And basically we want this corner to be on the dark brown line, between, like the line between the... So you have a kind of thick dark brown line, and the top edge of that line is the border with the white tile right above it. That's the top position of where you can have this corner. And the bottom position is only like a third of the way down the brown line. So that's how narrow the position is for the ideal position. So that's why we're not going to beat ourselves up if we don't hit it. But like if you're a beginner and you have like 10-20 seconds to set this up before you actually go for it, it is ideal in order to try to, if you're trying to get GBS for the first time and trying to get it down, it's ideal to try to hit this exact position. And then the other cue that I drew as well is this pink line. There's a little bulge in the brown line, right? And then if you stare at the line at that exact point where the bulge is, basically the bottom of Mario's shadow, or the coconut shadow, needs to approximately be halfway or above on that bulge. It shouldn't be further down than halfway along the bulge. And so basically halfway along the pink line that I've drawn. It's important to remember that the coconut is swaying around a bit, and so all of the positions that I'm giving are relative to about the midpoint of the swaying. So the point that the coconut is swaying around, if you average it out in your head, the midpoint is approximately what you're aiming for. And there are probably better cues that involve like Mario's shadow, the top of it or something, but I just couldn't find anything that I liked as much as this. Because I like this cue because it gives a good visual intuition on where you are, even if you're playing the game a little bit faster. Because of the overlap between the dark shadow and the brown line, you can kind of get an intuition, a feel for the size of the overlap between the shadow of the coconut and the brown line using this and the polygon, and those two together give you a pretty good feel for how the position works. So I'm gonna show you that using my save state. So my save state is programmed to be pretty much in the dead middle of the zone where it works, right? You can see from the Z coordinate, it works between like 35.7 and 38.8, I think, so this is about halfway. And so you can see what I mean with you can stare at it a bit, that polygon. So like the section, the flat, almost flat edge at the back of the coconut, the left corner on that edge, we're trying to get it to just kind of stand on the line between the whites and the brown. Like slightly above works, slightly below works. I can show you actually my memory editor, which I need to actually have turned on. Forgot about that. So we have, yeah, this. It's like I can type the positions in, right, using this if I have them written down here, right? So the top position it works on is 38.88, which is here. And the bottom position is 35.72, which is here. So you can kind of, but you can feel this out in your own testing if you have the coordinate display up. But basically, those are kind of the references for about where the position is and when it works. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Hang on. Turn off the position lock. So that's the ideal position, and you also want to avoid the no-clip position. That's something I also said I would show. The smallest coordinate where the no-clip happens is this, right? The position looks like this. It's similar to the others, but you'll notice that the dark shadow does not actually cross over the brown line. There's a white sliver between them. And that is what you are trying to avoid. If you see the white sliver, you're too far forwards, you need to just move back slightly to... So it can be quite hard to get the exact position, but like this position I think is too far down. Yeah, 13134.57. It is too far down, but it's still in a zone where GBS should work fairly consistently. You just get the bad animation, like I said. But you can see I can tell that it was too far down. I can tell this is a good position, 640, no problem. But yeah, basically, just for the no-clip zone, just make sure you are avoiding the little white sliver that you can see here. Not every position with the sliver will no-clip, obviously, but it is the minimum position, and it just shows you need to be standing further back. The no-clip, by the way, looks like this. That's if I don't hover. If I hover, it kind of looks like this, which is really bad because basically as the coconut rolls back, you hit it with the hover nozzle and that blasts it down into the floor, and then it bounces into the sea more times than not. And so it's really important to avoid the no-clip position for that reason. Yeah, that's basically it. So those are the positions, and those are all of the visual cues. So let me now show you what GBS actually looks like. So this is again the ideal position. I'm going to hold forward and frame advance to show you the cues. So the first frame, like I said, is here. Actually, hang on, let me do this again because I want to show you what the frame before the first frame looks like as well. So like, the frame before the first frame is this one. If I hover now, so the whole time I was holding up, right? And frame advancing, holding up. So now I'm gonna drop the stick and hold R. And basically you just pop out of the top of the roof, and then there's no real adjustment you can do in order to fix that. You can't like hold forwards unless you react like superhumanly fast, which is not really possible. So that's the first frame. Second frame is this frame. Stickless works, so that's stickless, and the downward tap does not work because it just pushes you out of the top of the roof again, slows you down too much. Second frame is this one. Here stickless works again, and the downward tap also works. And then we have the third frame, which is this one. Stickless does not work, you go too far under, grab the roof, and then the downward tap does still work. So those are basically the inputs to do for GBS. Or those are all of the ones that work on this setup. And on the non-ideal zones, like I said, the difference is if you're slightly high of the position, too far forward, then the first frame of stickless doesn't work, otherwise it's the same. And if you're too far back, I'm going to show you this because of the stupid janky animation. Where is it? Sorry. So this is 137, so if I stand slightly too far back... I think... I'm stupid, like, that position was fine, wasn't it? 13135, yeah, like this. The animation changes, and I just want to show you what that looks like. So you get pushed in to the roof more quickly, like this. See, I'm already in the roof, even though I haven't hit the visual cue. But if you look at what happens with the visual, it doesn't cover the whole of the green line. Instead, it kind of pushes into the green line and then, like, hesitates a bit, and that can throw you off. I've actually noticed that that's messed me up a good amount. I expect it to cover the line, but then if I'm standing in slightly the wrong place, it just kind of bounces into it, and then I mess up my visual cue. It just kind of messes up my intuition on what the animation should look like. So like playing that out in real time, it looks like this, right? So it's just slightly different from the normal clip that you get. I did it stickless there, which is frame perfect. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So, you know, I've given 2 sets of inputs to go for, 2 visual cues to go for, and I haven't really said which do you go for. I'm gonna say that in a sec. I'm gonna give some explanation on how to think about that. The reason I haven't been specific about it is because there are pros and cons associated with different approaches, essentially, so I want to cover a few ideas for how to do that. But the first thing I want to do is just give a little bit of discussion about how visual cues and input lag work. So this is more of a general conversation, but I think it's important for our people to understand this. So, you know, I'm saying react to a visual cue. Actually, I'm not saying that. I'm saying anticipate a visual cue. So... like, anticipating a visual cue is gonna, you know, it's a human thing, it's gonna be variable for different people how this works. Particularly for a cue that is trying to hit a precise position of 2 or 3 frames. You know, so I'm basically just saying it works differently for different people, depending on what their mental timing is. But also, so you're gonna want to practice and also adapt your timing depending on what you find works for you. So like the cues that I'm giving shouldn't be taken as absolute Bible because they can be affected by your mental timing. They can be affected by input lag as well, which varies for different people. It is possible to actually fix your input lag so that it is perfect. Input lag should be 3 frames exactly, pretty much, of which about 2 3/4 is within the game engine. A quarter is a CRT. A monitor has anywhere between like 0 and 1/4 of extra input lag, 1/4 of a frame, over the top of a CRT. But for a lot of people, they will have more input lag than that because they're playing on a shitty TV, or because they're on an emulator that has extra input lag because of USB problems and this kind of stuff. I will link a video that shows what the correct input lag looks like, and that's been recorded on my emulator, but it works equally well for console. So it's worth trying to get rid of input lag if you want to make these visual cues work. And that also raises the issue of 3DAS, which is a game whose game engine has built into it an additional at least 3 frames of input lag. We don't actually know exactly how much, somewhere between 3 and 6 frames, which is a huge amount. So like 3 frames is the total input lag you would expect on SMS on Wii or GameCube. Same on Wii and GameCube, and also on a correctly configured Dolphin emulator. But on 3DAS you get at least double that, and so the cues are all going to be timed slightly differently to each other, and so you want to just make sure you adjust that when you're practicing, you know what to go for. Just find something that works for you, essentially. And yeah, do not react to the visual cue. You anticipate the visual cue, so you see it coming. Like if I roll the coconut down, I am watching as the roof hits it. I'm not seeing it hit it and then inputting, because that gives you an additional inconsistency of your own reaction time, and it also gives you an additional... Yeah, it's basically just the inconsistency of your reaction time that affects it in that situation. So the way to do this, in my opinion, the best practice for doing an anticipation visual cue is to stare at the line that is fixed in the background. So stare at your visual cue in the background on Pinner, and then with your peripheral vision you basically see the yellow line of the hut approaching it, and then you react to where you think the collision is going to happen, and that's basically how you get GBS to be timed correctly. Alright, so yeah, the final thing I was going to address was, when do I do stickless? When do I do the downward tap? Which visual cue do I use? And that is a subtle question. So basically I said if you're standing in the perfect position, then you have 2 frames of stickless and 2 frames of downward tap. And the second frame of stickless is the same as the first frame of downward tap, which gives you a total of 3 frames that you can hit. If you stand in slightly the wrong place, you'll notice that stickless is more likely to not work. And this is generally true. There are frames on the roof where stickless gives you 0 frames. Does not work. There are positions, I should say. Z positions on the roof where stickless does not work. Downward tap always works. It almost always gives you 2 frames. Sometimes it gives you 1 frame. But it is inherently more consistent. It works in more positions on the roof with similar visual cues, and so that is the trade-off. Stickless is a more consistent input. You can't really do it differently. As long as you are disciplined about how you release the analog stick and how you press R, you just have to drop it. Don't hesitate. Don't fudge it. Drop it, and then smack R at the same time. Like, then you will get the same input each time. Whereas with the downward tap, you don't really know how much you are tapping down. It can be, you can really lean on the stick, or you can just tap it too little. In practice, it doesn't make a difference much. It is still very consistent. But for a beginner, I would recommend stickless. I would recommend positioning in the exact right position and then aiming for the 2 frames of stickless. That's when you start getting it. If you build things up, right, and you've managed to make stickless work, it's worth trying to make downward tap work as well. Because then if you're in a run situation and you see your position is slightly off, and I say slightly, I mean even this position is slightly wrong, right, then downward tap is a lot more likely to work. And so if you want to main downward tap so that you're more robust against different positions, then that is a good strategy in my opinion for anyone who is slightly faster than a beginner. So someone who is a beginner, meaning someone who only cares about like doing GBS faster than 10 minutes spent doing Gelato Beach. Or like trying to get it on the first coconut and that kind of thing. But if you're a bit more experienced, then downward tap is good. And if you're even more experienced than that, this is what I personally do. Basically, go for stickless, but react. If you see that Mario is like plunging into the roof, then you can react by tapping back and saving GBS. And even if you're overeager on your reaction on Mario, if stickless would have still made it, chances are downward tap would also make it, because remember the middle frame, both stickless and downward tap works. So basically, you could kind of use downward tap as a backup if, you know, I'm aiming for stickless here, and I'm getting either of the 2 frames that stickless works on, but if I go slightly too late like this, I can react and tap back and get a downward tap, and it'll still work, and that gives you a true 3-frame GBS. I say true, it's still possible to mess it up, but those are basically my tips, and so that affects the visual cue for timing as well, very slightly. If you're aiming for stickless, I would say you should aim for the 1st frame cue, but if you're aiming for downward tap, I think the second frame is better to aim for. And yeah, if you're aiming with stickless and backing up with downward tap, same thing. I aim for the 1st frame. Or actually, I think if you're very accurate with your aim, you can aim for the 2nd frame because it's in the middle, and then if you go slightly early, it'll work. If you go slightly late, you'll have to react, but it will still work as well. So you'll get a 3-frame GBS. And that is it. God, I spoke fast there, but I wanted to make sure I got everything out because this is quite a technical thing, I think. Making GBS consistent is not easy, so I wanted to actually give precise but still manageable instructions for how to do it, and to make sure that absolutely every beginner, no matter the skill level, has the tools they need to actually hit GBS at least once and have a decent chance of hitting it in a run and not losing an absurd amount of time. And then also a graduation for how you would get faster at GBS. That's the way that I try to teach it. When you're practicing, just make sure you do not fix the exact same position each time, because you will overfit mentally, you will overlearn the position, and you won't be able to react to the different positions you'll get in runs. So it's good to either make a save state or position store somewhere around the back of the roof, and then just practice your run-ups, practice your spots. You know, this spot, I think this barely works. 13135.57, is this actually... It's very slightly too far down. Yeah, so I tend to be biased downwards slightly. But yeah, basically, you can look at the Z position to see... You can get into a position and then check against the Z coordinate to see if it's good. And then even without looking at Zs, you can just try to actually do the clip and see if your inputs work for the position that you picked out. And that's basically how you would practice GBS. So like this. A little tip, by the way, for the... jumping around in the air. You can actually input the stick movement quite late and still not change your angle, and it's kind of gives you less movement if you do that, obviously, because you land more quickly. So if you're trying to micro adjust your position, it's good to do it that way. And yeah, that's basically it. So that's your practice strat. I am going to, I think, take a quick break now, and then I'm going to cover tree throw and roof throw, the more advanced strats. I just wanted to take a break to catch a bit of a breath, because I wanted to not make the video too long and get through all of this crap to get a good consistent GBS. So I need to catch a breather. I'll be right back. Alright, so I just noticed my input display stopped working at some point during the clip explanation, but I judged it wasn't worth redoing it because the inputs are all fairly simple in that section, and I'd already described them. So what I will do instead is I will just record a couple of samples for you guys to actually see the inputs, and then make sure I don't minimize the damn input display again. Nothing much I really wanted to show off anyway, pretty much just what we've already seen. So how to do stickless like that, and how to do the downward tap as well, which actually, let me show that off a bit better. Yeah, there we go, that's the downward tap. that's pretty much it. I mean, everything else was just pretty much explanations of when to time things, which doesn't really require that much nuance with the inputs. So that's it, I'll move on. Next section then is going to be... This is my first tutorial, so I'm not going to beat myself up about a little error with the input display being minimized, which is the bane of every speedrunner's existence, to be honest. Yeah, next is going to be... section 4, which is going to be on roof throw. So this is where we're getting into more advanced strats that are typically done at sort of standards 120 level or thereabouts. Anyone has like a 122 onwards might look into picking up roof throw. The same goes for tree throw, but tree throw is harder. So, you know, tree throw and roof throw are strats for the tree and the roof. The clip strat is going to be the same. I'm not going to teach any other ones. But yeah, paranoid now about input display, but yeah, I think we should be fine. Okay. So with roof throw. I'll start at this position and then I'll show how to do it. So roof throw has a time save. I timed it earlier. I would say it's compared to the strat that I showed earlier, the basic strat, roof throw should save somewhere around 3 seconds. So if you do the basic strat as fast as possible, then I was getting like 2.8, and if you do like an extra hop or something, then more like 3.5. So sometime around 3 seconds is about the time save you can expect for roof throw. So the first thing we're going to do is adjust our visual cue to be around... So let me show you exactly what I mean by that. Here. Mario's shadow, right? This is the cue for where we're going to jump in order to go for roof throw. Mario's shadow is basically in the absolute middle of all of these lines. So the two blue lines are the cracks between the floorboards, and then you have the green line, which basically connects the V, which is the corner of the floorboard, the next set of floorboard cracks, with like the space right in the middle of these two blue lines, right? And like halfway in the middle of that is the center of the coconut shadow-ish, and basically where Mario is standing, sort of in that spot is where you want to be, between all that stuff in the middle. And yeah, so roof throw, I guess I haven't described what it is yet. It's basically a strat where you throw the coconut onto the roof and then use the intervening time. Let me actually do it properly. You throw the coconut onto the roof and use the intervening time to grab the coconut and center the camera. Again, important to center the camera from the right, which is the reason why the setup is slightly tilted in pointing left versus the shine, so that when we grab the roof, it will automatically be centered to the right. But yeah, pretty much just a strat for getting up on the roof faster and grabbing the coconuts and then progressing on... lost the angle. But yeah, we approach with walk to the spot that I just described in the visual cue, and then the inputs are basically a short jump, which I would suggest is about 3 frames. I'm not entirely sure, because you just kind of... It is flexible, you can do most things, but it's not like a 1 frame jump, which is actually quite hard to hit, or the full 7 frame. It's just kind of a 3 frame jump like this, 3 frame jump, or 4 frames, or whatever. I think it's quite lenient. I picked the position deliberately to try to make the strat lenient. You do the jump, and then you press B with a specific timing. I would say maybe 4 frames after you press A. I don't know. You'd have to actually look back at my video to see exactly what it is. But it is lenient, so you don't have to worry. You just kind of internalize this kind of, you know, 1-2, 1-2, like this to do the roof throw. it's, you know, it's important with roof throw to not run forward too much or not jumping off and then throw against the front of the roof, and also not to do a massive throw which will send the coconut into the blender, which it is possible to do. I'm not exactly sure how. I think with a really late B press you can, I find it quite hard to hit the blender. But some people find that consistently they can get the coconut to hit the blender. I think if you stand like right at the front, I mean, I just can't, I don't know, but basically that can happen. And so the setup is kind of designed to get it in the sweet spot in the middle. Important with roof throw is to get the coconut in the middle of the roof, which gives you the biggest chance of actually grabbing it. And you do that by just having this slight angle towards the shine when you're on the run up. So like, if you're slightly pointing towards the shine, then you will find the coconut sits up in a nice position in the middle, and you've also centered from the right direction, which are the two things that you want. And the rest of the inputs are basically we wait. Okay, so we're here, right? We've thrown the thing. We land and buffer a spin jump out of the landing. So this is a little situational spin jump timing that you want to learn. And hover, you might be tempted to pump hover and grab like this, but it is quite hard to spot the position if you do that. So what makes it easier is to do a longer hover, you know, up to half a second even, but actually start the hover lower down when you're parallel with the ledge that you're grabbing, to parallel with the roof. And if you do that, you'll find you still have more than enough time to grab the coconut, provided you throw it well. Bonk happens sometimes. I still don't know exactly what causes the bonk. But basically like this. That's a good way of showing it. I've kind of, this save state is maybe a bit too close to the front, so I'm having to like over adjust my position. But basically it's more important to get like a good angle on the roof than it is to get the position left and right correct. So very gentle angle like this, for example. But the positioning obviously helps you to stand in the middle, which is where you want to be so that you can set up for GBS using all the visual cues. And then do GBS. Hog. Backward tap. Yeah, so once you've grabbed this, you wait a bit. Don't jump immediately, or you might get a double jump, which is annoying. Because it just sends you too high. But basically, wait a bit and then just do a short A press and a B press, and that way you will go into a dive where you can attempt to grab the coconut. Like this. And once during the grab animation is the place where I like to press L to center the camera. From the right, of course. You can also center the camera during the ledge get up, which is here. Let me remember how to do that. So like that. This also works. I'm not sure which of these is safer actually. I prefer, I would say as a beginner, it's definitely better to press L later, if only for the reason that you basically have fewer inputs to do. You can, you know, I can wait here and just press L. So it makes it easier to learn the strat. But just make sure, you know, like after you've hit the ledge, you are holding neutral, so that when you jump and dive, you don't change your angle. And that should be that. Oh, the other thing, by the way, about why it's important to have just that straight on but slightly tilted angle is, you know, if your angle is too errant, then the coconut rolls off the side of the roof, which can be dangerous. It does quite often on this side, particularly, like to bounce into the water. So, yeah, there we go. Is that for roof throw? I'm trying to think if there was anything else that needed to be said. The backup for missing roof throw for I can't actually do this fast at all, but like if anything goes wrong, you just run back and do it again with the same cues. Stand in this position. You know, I zoom the camera out there, but yeah, you can just do that. I was watching Audio Killers last night and he did this backup extremely fast, so it is definitely possible to get it down. If you don't want to mess about with that, like for example, you centered the camera but the coconut fell down, don't forget you can always just continue like normal GBS setup where you just jump backwards a bit and then get right back up with a spin jump and then continue. Might be easier to do if you're already doing a backup. Yes, okay, I think that is everything I wanted to say for roof throw. There isn't much more to it. Bonking the coconut can change your angle, in which case you can straighten it out, like I said, during the basic setup by running forwards. But I don't know, this is not something I really worry about or know how to advise about. I also don't know what causes this bonk, honestly. It just usually doesn't happen. But you know, this is the first tutorial that's ever been made on roof throw, so I'm gonna leave some of these questions unanswered because I still don't really know. And yeah, that is that. I'm gonna next move on to tree throw. So, tree throw. Tree throw is something I really am not comfortable teaching, but again, there is no tutorial on tree throw, and so therefore I am gonna be brave and make one. Tree throw. The time save for tree throw. Yes, the strat that I taught at the beginning, where you just carry the coconut all the way, is 3.5 seconds max, 2.5 seconds typically, because in RTA you don't really want to go for very precise tree throws. Or like, if you get good at tree throw, maybe you can expect to save 3 seconds consistently, but basically like that. So roof throw is both easier and saves a bit more, slightly more, but they're both comparable to each other. So like, yeah, the amount of time it takes to do GBS is actually heavily affected by the amount of jumping around and you do in order to get into the position at the top. But I would say if you do minimal jumping, you can expect tree throw and roof throw to get you a 32 at least with the normal spot. 30, 31 if you're good. But yeah, and because both of those strats save about 3 seconds, you would try to aim for a 38 if you're doing basic GBS and trying to do it cleanly. This is IL timing. You have the practice code. So yeah, tree throw. The most important thing to know about tree throw is all of the visuals are very inconsistent and sporadic. And the strat is extremely sensitive to the angle you approach the tree at as well, which is really annoying. And this is why I would personally encourage a lot of discipline when it comes to how you approach the tree. Basically, try to always do it in exactly the same way. And these are the tips that I would give for that. Starting out, right, go forwards. So remember the inputs here, this, and then during the spin jump dive, gonna switch to the hover nozzle and zoom the camera in as well. That's what I'm doing here. Like when I get to, sorry, let me show this Noki. When I get to this Noki, like the small one, I can't pause with my foot. Like there, fuck it, I leant down. So when I get to this small Noki, which I just passed, that's when I'm gonna steer slightly. I'm holding forwards and going in a straight line forwards until then, and I do a long rollout as well, which I'm again trying to do to make the setup more consistent with the tree. When I get to the Noki, that's when I will steer towards the tree quite sharply. Like this, and we're aiming for basically the cue that I use here is I'm trying to get Mario. You see how this leaf here is about a Mario width? I'm trying to basically cross this leaf while aiming straight for the tree. So we kind of go over the bump that is right before it. So here is the bump. And then go over this, and this is the spot where we do a long rollout, and then into a spin jump dive. Again, the spin jump dive, the earlier frame you can do it, the higher up the tree you get. And when it comes to tree throw, most of the time is lost by grabbing the tree too low, and so the higher up you can get, the faster, but it might make it harder to actually set up the throw angle. That's a little trade-off you have to bear in mind. But yeah, basically, this is kind of the angle we're approaching at. This is perfect. And so I made a save state right after all of that and after the spin jump dive, which is here. And that's what I'm going to use to demonstrate the strat. So once we've gotten our approach consistent, I have a little cue for when to turn the camera, which is when the leaf... You see this like leaf? Yeah, here. The leaf at the bottom of the screen, the shadow of the leaf is, as soon as that crosses the bottom of the monitor, that's about a good time to swing the camera out for a camera turn. So I'm just holding C right here. And then you get a feel for how much you need to turn it, but basically we can use a visual cue in order to approximately know what we're looking for. And let me just show off the visual cue. Tree throw actually, it's a ridiculous strat. I have 3 different visual cues to show for this, because you kind of need to react to a lot of different things in order to get it to work well, because all of the cues are by themselves not good enough, because the strat is very difficult to get consistent, essentially, in terms of it's difficult to always do it exactly the same way. Here, so you see these 2 arrows that I've drawn? We're looking at the posts on the ramp to the cabana, the little walkway dock thing. Those 2 posts, basically we want to try to get the right edge of the tree that we're climbing to be between those 2. And because of how tree throw works, actually, let me give you a bit of intuition on this strat, right? So, alright. Yep, so what was I saying? So I just showed off the visuals, and so I wanted to give a bit of intuition on tree throw. Before I do that, right, actually, I just wanted to make a quick note that to make sure to hold B, you don't have that much time, right, before you hit the top here, and you're gonna start holding B after you've adjusted the camera. And so it's just important to make sure you do not hold B too high, or otherwise you'll bonk on the coconut, you might miss the coconut, and it's just generally very painful. And so you have to be quite decisive with your camera turn here, so that you can start holding B early enough. And if you feel that you're in the wrong position, then honestly I would just take the L and carry the coconut the entire way. Carry it, so you can chance a little throw here if you want, but it's something I tend to just not do, to be honest, because I don't know how to make that consistent. But basically, yeah, that's what I wanted to say about that. So the visuals that I showed, it's a kind of range, right? And so I just wanted to show a bit of intuition for the different angles that you can get with tree throw. Because if you aim too far right, then you will throw into the tree. And if you aim slightly further left than that, you will throw like this. Actually, I kind of messed that up because I did a bit of a wobble as I threw it. But basically, this is a slightly too far to the right. You can throw like this, just past the tree, and it'll go off into the water on this side. And slightly further left will give you the perfect line where optimally the coconut will land back here. That is in RTA. Well, we're not going to aim for that in RTA, but that is basically the perfect line. And then it is safer to aim slightly further left because, among other things, you can hit the post here, which will save you in many situations. And yeah, basically. So the two cues that I gave, they're, like I said, very approximate cues, which depend on like how you grip, how you hug the tree, which angle you came from, and some things I don't even understand. So they're not like, they're slightly fickle cues, but nonetheless, the range that I gave, the right, if you're just very slightly left of the right arrow that I showed, then you will get the perfect line, or like the right arrow is pretty much the perfect line. So like what I mean is this is just about, this is like actually was slightly too far right. But like if I can turn the camera so that that post is, the post that's on the right of the visual cue is yeah, like this, then if I run off, I should actually be able to hit a perfect throw down the middle here. Or like that's kind of the optimal angle. But the one on the left is kind of as far left as you can go to still be safe, and hit the little post. You know. So kind of like this should be safe. Yeah. You'll hit the post, and so that's kind of basically what I'm saying is if you use this visual cue, it is still better to be on the right side of it. The further right you can get, the better. But it is just, these are still the two safe bounds, basically, that I gave, for making sure the coconut doesn't fall off the sides here, or go further right, or go further left than this, in which case it will roll into the water, basically. That's what I wanted to say about that. So yeah, that is the alignment, the first alignment cue we're going to do, but this one, like I said, is a very weak and sketchy cue. So the next cue we're going to use in order to adjust after we have set our camera and done the initial grab is this leaf. We're going to, you know, tree throw involves running off this leaf, right? And this leaf has like a bright green line down the middle of it. And so where we are relative to the line is going to be the second cue that we're going to use to judge if we are actually approximately throwing it in the right direction. So let me show you that. Cue number 2 is this one. Right. Basically, you can see the green line, the light green line that I was talking about, and Mario's trajectory. And I've drawn 3 different lines to signify different trajectories that paths that Mario can take as he's running down this leaf. So the light blue one is parallel to the light green line. The pink one is aiming, basically going in such a direction as to, you can imagine that you're going to hit the light green line just as you hit the tip of the leaf, right? Because you can't see the tip of the leaf because it's kind of behind, it's curving downwards like this. But the line kind of imagines that if you keep running along the leaf, you will hit the middle of the leaf, the light green line, right at the tip. And then the red line is a line that's going to hit the light green line earlier than when you get to the end of the leaf, right? So these are the 3 cues, and these roughly correspond to, the pink line corresponds to a perfect throw that I was saying, the exact right angle that you want. The light blue line corresponds to a safe throw, and the red line corresponds to a throw that is usually going to hit the tree, and in general needs correction. So the red line you absolutely need to correct to turn in to be more like the pink line, and the light blue line, you should correct it as well. But it's less important to correct it because you will likely hit the post and be safe. But that does lose 1 second compared to a good free throw. Or actually in RTA I would say only half a second. It's really not a huge problem. But yeah, let me show you these dynamically. So like with a video, with a few examples. So like perfect throw should be set up perfect. Yeah, like this, right? Yeah, there. So this was a pretty good one. I was basically running in along the pink line. It looked like I was gonna collide with the tip of the leaf in the way that I described earlier. And this basically gives you this kind of an angle. I was just very slightly far to the right there, which is unfortunate. I mean, but I kind of aimed slightly. On my first adjustment, I aimed slightly too far to the right. But yeah, I suppose you need to kind of get used to this cue. I misjudged it a little bit and went slightly too far right, but basically falling off should give you the perfect line if you loosely are pointing towards the tip of the leaf. Like I said, relative to what I just did, very slightly left. So that's that. The red line is like if I'm going too far right, and you can see I'm just running straight along, and I would have thrown into the tree. We can salvage that by basically doing a little adjustment. So when we get up here, and we're going in that direction, this should be a perfect throw, what I just did. Yeah. If we're going too far right, like this, basically we can turn the camera a little bit, just as we're running, tilt it to the right to correct the line. So let me demonstrate that. This is too far right, just turn the camera a little bit, and then you should be able to get a... That was an overcorrection. But yeah, like, just turn it a little bit and you should be able to fix the line for the tree throw. So there is that, and then there is also if we're really facing the left, like over here, then the adjustment you want to do here, so this was the blue line. I was running parallel to the light green line, or pretty much parallel to it. In order to fix that, I just do a sidle. I basically switch the stick slightly upright, and then straighten it out, and that way I'm running with the same angle, but I'm basically on the light green line, or like very slightly to the left of it, which I think is about perfect. So like this, and that gives you a corrected throw. Yep, so that is the second adjustment. And the last cue that I think is important to know about. Actually, before I get onto that, I want to thank Peaches for drafting notes on tree throw that basically gave those two adjustments, and yeah, gave me the idea for how to teach that. So thanks to Peaches for that. Yes, so the last adjustment I want to show off. This isn't really an adjustment. Rather, this is a cue that you can use to check if you did it right. So after you've done the throw, it's too late, you can't change the throw, but you can basically look at where the coconut is going relative to this little bump in the tree in front shadow, right? You see this bulge. Basically, think of the midpoint of the coconut and think of these two lines. If the midpoint of the coconut is slightly to the basically if the midpoint of the coconut is exactly on the right line, then you should have the perfect line. If the midpoint of the coconut is slightly to the right of the right line, then there's a good chance it's gonna go into the C on the right, like I showed. Obviously, if it's too far, then it will hit this exact tree. But then that's kind of how you know immediately you should probably abort. But this is a good way of training the success of your tree throw, is to basically look at this cue. And the same is true of the line on the left. Again, think of the midpoint of the coconut. If it's going there along the left blue line, then chances are that the coconut is going to hit the post. And if the coconut's any further left than that, then it gets a bit sketchy. There's still a chance it'll hit the post, but it's more risky. So yeah, that's basically that. So the perfect line, or a good line, is then basically the coconut going right down the middle of this and slightly to the right. So just somewhere, the closer you can get it to the right blue line, it is the better, right? But that basically shows you're doing it well. So yeah, I mean, could just do a few demonstrations of that to just see how I read the position here. So like this is probably too far left, and you can see it basically went down the middle on the left and hit the post. That was like the left blue line. The right blue line is kind of like this with this little adjustment. Yep, there, see it kind of went down there. It worked. With tree throw, it's nice to, I think, do this double jump in order to set up roof throw. I have the shine moved here because I want to just do some timing to show the different speeds. Actually, let me just do that now. So like, you know, this is going to be too far right. I adjusted it a bit. It's actually going to be slightly left of the ideal line, but like, I mean, for RTA, this is a pretty good tree throw. 22.54. I moved the shine in order to stop the timer, basically. This is a perfect line. Actually, there's a chance that would have fallen in. 22.17 there. It wasn't quite perfect. But yeah, this should be perfect. No, actually, this is too far left. So basically, I can tell just from all three of those cues, I can kind of read off where I think the coconut is going. But yeah, that's basically it. Those are the things to bear in mind for roof throw and tree throw. So I'm getting 22s here. Let me try to do a perfect throw, actually. Ooh. Yeah, 22 still. It doesn't really save that much time, or at least not with those double jumps that I was doing. There is another thing that's actually quite important that I should say, which is how far you throw the nut depends on when you press B. So if you press it quite low, the nut will not get much distance. And if you press it very close to after you fall off the leaf, then it will go very far. And so you can see here, for example, the nut went to here. If it were slightly further left, it would have fallen in. But if I had thrown the nut later, it would not have fallen in because it wouldn't have gotten as much distance. So it's just important to bear that in mind. I'm not going to give any cues for when to press B. You can figure it out to your own comfort. But I would say, what do? I kind of press B when it's there. So like I fall 2/3 of the way down, sorry, 1/3 of the way down, and then I press B. So these are like 22s to 22.5. If I hit the post, let me try to hit the post. Just I wanted to show how much time that loses. So here I'm not hitting the post. Yes, a little too far to the left, like this. So this is very far to the left. I actually dead hit the post. This kind of walking pattern with these double jumps, and you find you've lost about I've lost about a second. So I was getting between 22 and 22.5. Here I got about 23.5. Last thing I wanted to show was the basic strat. So just wanted to show this because I wanted to show that it doesn't really lose that much time. 26 and a half-ish. So yeah, the time loss is around 3. For a good tree throw, actually, the time loss can be around 4 seconds compared to a decent basic strat. But I would say 3.5 is still my go-to estimate for that. All right. Is that it? I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. I think I've covered everything. Yeah, if you can tell the nut is gonna fall in. If you can tell the nut is gonna fall in, then what is the best backup? I don't know, I would say turn back, and I personally just spin jump onto this and do the classic strat, which is you jump at the tree and do a couple of late spam sprays, as late as you can. This strat I would not recommend as a main strat because of the huge amount of RNG involved, randomness involved in where the knot goes, and the amount of, like, if it goes into Catsquacks, it can just be slower than even the basic strat that I was teaching, and so that's why I just kind of avoid that. But yeah, I would basically just, as a backup, I would just jump up here and knock them out the tree. Alternatively, and spray it out of the tree like this, and yeah, pretty much get the knot. Yeah, that is it. That's all I wanted to teach for GBS. I'm just going to include a very short section called Further, that just to briefly talk about some of the other strats that I haven't covered here. So the GBS that I've described, tree throw, roof throw, is pretty much exactly what an advanced player would do. There's a slight difference being an advanced player typically targets a different GBS spot, which is around here somewhere. I don't know how to do this strat at all, but basically you clip in and do different stick movements. But because you're so far down the roof, you have to be a lot more aggressive with the stick. This is called Yossi spot, instead of this, which I taught, which is called normal spot. And I will include a little tutorial that someone made purely for Yossi spot somewhere. So there is that. That's typically the fastest RTA strat that is done. There is also a classic RTA strat where you do not adjust your angle, but instead just kind of stand here and like backflip and throw the coconut, and then that pushes you into the roof and then you hover. I don't know how to do this strat either. There are a few tutorials for it as well. I guess I could link one, but this strat, okay, I should talk about this strat a little bit, because it used to be the main advanced strat until roof throw was found, but roof throw is typically seen as better because you don't really risk losing the coconut when you do roof throw, because you're just doing the standard GBS clip. But when you do backflip, typically the coconut just falls down, or at least classically it did, and I feel like there have been some developments where people are figuring out ways to make the coconut not fall down, but essentially if you can do that, then backflip is a viable. If you can be safe on the coconut not falling down if you miss backflip, then backflip is a decent alternative to roof throw that you might prefer. It's kind of a very input precise, I remember, whereas roof throw is more of an organic strat where it's kind of affected by different things like where you are left and right. I just remembered I forgot to mention something about roof throw, which is that you can actually drift in midair. Like not least when you're grabbing the actual. You can drift a little bit when you're grabbing during the hover, but like you can do a lot of drifting just in midair after the jump dive. You know, so like if the coconut's really gone off to the side, you can kind of grab it that way. That's something I should have mentioned for roof throw, but it doesn't matter too much. And yeah, I wanted to also show the IL strats. In ILs, there is a common go-to strat, which is this backflip here. You kind of get up here. This strat was found by Orange, so it's often known as Orange strat. You basically stand around here and backflip onto the tree, and that pops up the coconut like I just showed. You're holding B as well after you backflip, which means you pick up the coconut and then run off the leaf and throw it for a normal roof throw. And this strat is inconsistent because of how the coconut pops up. You'll often not grab it, that's why it's only done in ILs. And the roof strat that is done for ILs is something that is called instant roof throw. It's roof throw, it's pretty normal, except you basically center the camera, stand still, and wait for the coconut. So you have to throw the coconut accurately, but you basically wait for the coconut to roll into you. If I can actually line that up. Yeah. You want the coconut to like fully roll into you, like, and so you can adjust left and right on the hover in order to make that happen. And basically, when it comes at you, you run into it, you hold up. I'm really not getting good positions here on the coconut. Certainly not with this save state, it's a bit sus. It's like, yeah, like, run forward a bit earlier and you basically get clipped into the roof. I can't actually really remember, but I know there's a specific timing that you run forward on, and then you improvise GBS. Basically, after that, you just kind of use your intuition and stick movements. Yeah, like that. See, I ran into it, I clipped into the roof, and then I would time a hover. And that's instant roof throw. This strat is RTA viable, but very difficult. Only real sort of specialists go for instant roof throw. You've seen Inkstar do it in runs, but that's pretty much it, or in any percent runs. And yes, that's... I'll just keep going until I get it. But yeah, those are the standard IL strats. And the world record is 1 second faster than the best run on these strats. And the world record uses the spam spray off the tree in order to get like an absolutely perfect RNG coconut. And that saves 1 second over the best on orange strat and instant roof throw. But orange strat and instant roof throw are the ones to learn because they are consistent in time. Fairly consistent in time. Whereas the spam spray obviously has a massive variance depending on where the coconut goes. They're only inconsistent in the sense that it can be hard to actually get orange strat to come out and you have to reset, but like when you do get orange strat, it tends to be about the same amount of time, and then with instant roof throw it's pretty much pure skill, and so it's kind of a lot more wholesome than the spam spray. But yeah, I'll link both of the ILs so you can see the difference between them. The one done on wholesome IL strats and the one done on the RNG strat. And that's it. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope it helps you on your GBS journey no matter what skill level you are. It's supposed to cover absolutely everything. So yeah, onwards.